Is there anyone who is going to remain in the Spanish channel for this event? Just curious. Because we would love, we would love to get a recording in the Spanish channel as well. Luvia and or Maritzel, if I give you co-host permissions or recording permissions, would you be able to start a recording when you're in the Spanish interpretation room?
As far as I am aware, I don't think you can assign us as co-host because it would immediately just bump us out of the assignment as interpreters.
Got it. Okay.
So, but I also don't know that you can record in the Spanish channel. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay. I'll give you permission to record. I won't make you co-host, but if it is apparent to you to record, that would be great. If not, we have an English recording and all of our slides are in both English and Spanish.
I've never seen the recording button, but if I see it, sure, I can go ahead and press record.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. All right, can we get our PowerPoint going, Matt? And I think we're ready to begin. Yay, welcome everyone to our TOPA Town Hall 2021 launch event. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll just wait a couple more minutes for folks to filter in. And just as a reminder, as you enter the room, please remain on mute so we don't have noise interference. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us on your Friday night to talk about housing preservation and policies that could really change the game for community land trusts in LA. And welcome to the launch of the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act in LA County campaign. My name is Josie Clarfon. I'm the Coalitions and External Relations Manager with Trust South LA. And before we get started, we're just going to explain how to access the live interpretation for this event. Matt, if you could go to the next slide. And I'm going to pass it over to our wonderful interpreter, Luvia, who's going to explain interpretation.
Yes, thank you, Josie. Hello, everyone. My name is Silvia, and I, along with my colleague, Maritzel, will be providing interpretation for today. Please, I'm sorry, we're actually here with Liberate, a language justice co-op that seeks to ensure that every person hears and speaks in the language they feel most comfortable in. Having said that, please know that the interpreters are here to bridge the communication between the parties. And so we ask everyone to please be aware of the fact that there is a bit of a lag when we are interpreting onto the opposite language. So we ask all the speakers to please pace yourselves and try and speak a little slower than you normally would. If at any point any of the interpreters are having trouble keeping up with the pace, we will gesture we will do the following gesture to signal for you to please slow down. Likewise, if we are having trouble hearing you, we will do this to ask you to please bring the volume up. As far as the feature here on Zoom, in a minute when the language interpretation is enabled, you will see a globe appear on the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and click on it and select the language of your choice. We are asking every person to please select a channel. So if you are a monolingual English speaker, select English. If you are a monolingual Spanish speaker, select Spanish. We ask you to please remain on that channel for the entirety of this event and not to switch between the channels. Y ahora para los oyentes en español, mi nombre es Lluvia y en compañía de mi colega Maritzel estaremos brindando apoyo de interpretación el día de hoy. Nosotras estamos en representación de Libérate, una cooperativa de justicia del idioma o lenguaje que busca asegurar que toda persona hable y escuche en el idioma en el que más cómoda se sienta. Queremos que sepan que las intérpretes estamos aquí para hacer un puente de la comunicación entre las partes y entonces les pedimos que por favor estén conscientes de que existe un pequeño retraso al interpretar. Así que a todos los oradores el día de hoy, presentadores, les pedimos que por favor hablen un cuanto más lento de lo normal. Si en cualquier momento estamos teniendo dificultad manteniendo el ritmo del orador, haremos la siguiente señal para pedirles que por favor hablen más lento. Más lento. De igual manera, si no podemos escucharles, haremos esto para pedirles que por favor hablen un cuanto más alto. En términos de la función aquí, de la función de interpretación, en unos momentos cuando lo activemos, vamos a ver un icono con la forma de un globo terráqueo. Por favor, haga clic en este si habla usted inglés únicamente. Por favor, seleccione inglés. Si habla español, seleccione español. Le pedimos que por favor se mantenga en ese canal por la duración completa de este evento. Gracias.
Thank you so much. I'm going to enable the interpretation function. So everyone should now see a little globe icon popping up at the bottom of their screen. Please select your preferred channel and we will begin. All right, so Matt, I think we can head to the next slide. So agenda for this evening. Well, actually, before I share the agenda, I do need to clarify that we are recording this Zoom meeting. We're also live streaming to Facebook, so you can view or share with your friends via Trust South LA's Facebook page. So that's TRUST South LA on Facebook. If you have any questions about the recording or do not consent to being recorded, please raise your hand or type into the chat. You can also turn off your camera. So our agenda for this evening, we're going to start off by listing our community agreements for the event, and I'll share an intro to the LA CLT Coalition. Then we want to hear from you all, who's joining us tonight and what brings you here. At 6:30, we're going to have Matt Vu from Trust South LA, who's going to explain what is a CLT and what is TOPA. aka the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. Followed by that, we'll hear from Liberty Community Land Trust, Zarita Jones, and a special guest, Silvia Venegas, who will explain why TOPA is important at this moment. Around 7 o'clock, we're going to have an opportunity for questions and answers with a legal expert from the Los Angeles Legal Aid Foundation, Jonathan Yeager. And then we'll talk about TOPA next steps and how you can keep up to date on this campaign. And then we'll close. So I think we can go to the next slide. Perfect. So community agreements for this evening, pretty simple. We want to remain on mute while folks are presenting so that we don't get noise interference. Also remember that this is a language justice space. So as Yuvia was explaining before, please be patient with the technology and respectful when it comes to that. If you have comments or questions, please use the chat feature. We will be recording the chat, so we'd love to hear from you. Create a space for everyone to participate and feel included, and most importantly, have fun and enjoy each other's virtual presence. Next slide. All right, so the Los Angeles CLT Coalition. The Los Angeles Community Land Trust Coalition is composed of 5 community land trusts from across LA County. These include the Beverly, Vermont CLT, El Sereno CLT, Trust South LA, Fideicomiso Comunitario Tierra Libre, and Liberty Community Land Trust. The coalition is committed to the preservation of low-income communities of color by decommodifying housing, promoting education, community empowerment, the conversion of tenants to owners, and making housing a human right. So why do we want to talk about TOPA today? Establishing the tenant opportunity to purchase in unincorporated LA County will set an important precedent as we move towards the ultimate goal of establishing TOPA in incorporated areas of LA County and LA City, hopefully statewide as well. Stay tuned as my colleagues present on why TOPA is important for housing justice and the CLT movement in our communities. So today's webinar will be facilitated by representatives from Trust South LA and Liberty Community Land Trust. A little bit about us, these 2 community land trusts that are hosting tonight's event. Trust South LA is a community-based effort that works to stabilize the neighborhoods south of downtown LA, where increased property values and rents have pushed out many long-term residents. Our mission is to serve as a steward for community-controlled land, to be a catalyst for values-driven, community-serving development, to build awareness and community leadership in issues of housing, transportation, and recreation, and to create programs and initiatives that encourage community building and economic opportunity. So Liberty Community Land Trust was created in December 2019 as part of an ecosystem that seeks liberation and healing through the development of a democratic economy with the goal of preserving and developing permanently affordable housing. Liberty is a Black-led, Black-brown focused CLT based in Los Angeles's Southwest, Mid-City, and adjacent communities, and is housed at the Umoja Center in historic Leimert Park Village, which is the center of Black activists and the Black arts community. Liberty CLT is the outgrowth of successful advocacy on transit justice, land use, community development, and tenants' rights, and demands for community control and self-determination that date back to the aftermath of the 1992 Los Angeles uprising. So we can head into the next section. That's a little bit about us, and we want to hear about who's joining us today. So we have a little exercise, a little technology assisted exercise that will help show us who's joining us and what you all are all about. So if you're joining via a phone or computer, you can do it either way. If you're on your computer, you can type this on your phone, but you can go to www.menti.com and it will ask you to put in a little code. So you enter that code and then it will prompt you to, I'm going to do it on my phone right now. It will prompt you to enter the zip code that you're joining from. And then we'll all see it on the screen. We'll see it on a map. So, oh, I guess the first question is what brings you here tonight? So Matt, if you want to share the Menti and then I can keep like explaining the instructions too. All right. Yeah, okay, so it'll ask you 2 questions and the code is, let me read the code again for folks. The code is 6884090. Let me type it in the chat. Six eight eight 4090.
Hey, I see little pins popping up. This is cute.
Woo, yeah. So if you enter what zip code you're joining from, your little pin will show up on the map. We'll just give everyone a couple minutes to enter their locations. And Matt, is it supposed to ask you 2 questions at once? Because I'm just doing it on my phone right now.
I think you can just answer them one at a time and then the results will show up when we go to the slide.
Got it. Okay, cool. Oh, cool. Okay, I can put my little pin.
This is so exciting. We have people coming in from all over LA.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I think especially because this is a county-wide discussion, I think it's really great to see, where everyone's coming from. It looks like we have, do we have East LA folks? We have South LA folks, some West Side folks. My pin keeps moving. Oh, got it. All right, cool.
Awesome.
Lots of South LA representation. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. What brings you here tonight? Wanted to learn more about TOPA. That's great because we're going to talk about TOPA for about an hour and we have a super in-depth Q&A as well. So we can really get into the weeds for that. And feel free, if you're having trouble with the Menti app, feel free to type anything in the chat as well. Ending homelessness, stabilizing housing, and communities. CLTs are awesome. I agree. Building power to pass TOPA. Needing to keep our homes out of the hands of speculators. That's a super important one that we'll talk about. This is so cool. I love this. Getting involved in TOPA in LA, building community ownership, policies to assist community land trusts. How can academics help? We have some academics in the room. Let's evict landlords by converting apartment buildings into co-ops. Not a bad idea. To house my neighbors and have the necessary tools to have community control. That's a big one, community control. This is super cool. To help the community. And do we have, will mentees save this for us so we can like have this for our records, do you know?
I think I can download that data, yes.
Cool. Thanks everyone for your responses. This is really fun. Just time checking myself. I think that we can go ahead and go to the next section. So I'm gonna pass it over to my colleague, Matthew Vu, who's gonna give us some background on CLTs and TOPA.
Thank you so much, Josie. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Matthew Vu. I am a resident of South Central for 5 years now, and I'm a student at LA Trade Tech, where I study community planning and economic development. And I'm so happy to be interning with Josie on this amazing project to help bring TOPA to LA County. So we want to start off with what is community land trust? And community land trusts are nonprofits that acquire, hold, and develop land in and for a geographically specific area. So I know that we showed the logos of who we are earlier. We have Beverly, Vermont, El Sereno, we have Liberty CLT in Leimert Park area, we have Trust, yeah, and then we have Fideicomiso in Boyle Heights and East LA. So all of us are specific in our communities and we serve the people who live where we live. The structure of a CLT requires the participation from homeowners and or tenants and the members of the community in the governing structure. So, you know, we all make decisions together. We all have a vote and a say, and it's not just top down. Everyone gets a chance to become part of the governing structure. So tenants can work together with CLTs to acquire a property together. And this is really awesome because it makes the process of acquisition easier for tenants and CLTs and helps build a background where all of us are engaged in the financial process and we know how to better take care of our communities. And it's really cool because the ideas behind the community land trust have historic roots in the indigenous Americas, in pre-colonial Africa, and in ancient Chinese economic systems. So what we're seeking to do is is to restore the idea of the land trust rather than to initiate it. We're carrying on ancestral knowledge to figure out how we can take care of our communities and our neighbors. And so that's really exciting, the opportunity that we have right now. So the state of community land trusts here in the United States, there are over 240 CLTs in the US. And actually the first one was a CLT called New Communities, Inc. in Southwest Georgia. New Communities, Inc. was actually born from the civil rights movement and was the product of collaboration between civil rights leaders and Black farm workers who decided to turn 5,000 acres of land into homesteads and agricultural area and provided affordable housing for Black farm workers and their families from 1969 to 1985. It's incredible because the benefits of CLTs is not just anecdotal, it has been studied and proven true. So in a study done by Emily Thaden and Greg Rosenberg and published in the Lincoln Institute, they found that homes that were guaranteed by CLTs or in the CLT structure were less likely to be in the process of foreclosure. Their traditional counterparts were 8.2 times more likely to be in foreclosure. They were also less likely to be delinquent, whereas traditional homes backed by traditional finances are 4.3 more times to be delinquent. And on top of that, CLTs help homeowners have pre-purchase education and cure delinquency rates at much greater rates. This is to say that CLTs provide a great benefit, not only individually, but to the community, because we are able to have more stable community members and build long-term. So that's really exciting about CLTs. And now we're talking about what TOPA is and why we need TOPA, right? So in the state of the movement in LA, California, and the Bay, TOPA is making its way down from the Bay to LA. The fight towards community control, not corporate control, has been ongoing. And so it's really exciting to see how just this past year in 2020, San Francisco passed their version of COPA, which is the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. And they passed theirs in June 2020. And in the 6 months since, the Mission Economic Development Agency in rapidly gentrifying Mission District has bought 3 buildings, and they're in contract to purchase 3 more. So that's 6 buildings that will be saved and made permanently affordable in the city of San Jose by one organization that was empowered through COPA. Just across the bay in Berkeley, they have been in talks about combining the Community and Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act since 2015. And right now they're in the midst of their own campaign to pass it at a local level. In Oakland in 2018, Moms for Housing came together. 4 homeless, unhoused mothers and their children occupied a vacant home. And with the support of their community, fought against these faceless corporate landlords and won the right to buy that home. Here in LA, they were supported with allies and comrades at ACE, who helped them raise $12 million to buy homes. And also, you know, their actions inspired a lot of things here in Oakland. I mean, in East LA. So, right, I remember I was taking a class at Trade Tech, and my professor, Eddie Torres, was talking about how they were inspired by this movement and took to the action in El Sereno to reclaim homes from Caltrans. And so the movement here in LA is just growing stronger. Last year, the city council directed the housing department to begin crafting an ordinance that would give the right of first refusal to community organizations by right in the city. And so we are just snowballing ahead. This is our turn to push it forward, but I think we need to understand why TOPA is so important. So with that, I would like to introduce my colleague Zarita from Liberty Community Land Trust.
Thanks so much, Matt. Zarita Jones here, Vice Chair of Liberty Community Land Trust. And the big question is, why the right to purchase? TOPA in itself is a tool for anti-displacement for low and moderate income tenants in gentrifying neighborhoods, just as the ones that you've seen and the ones that appeared on the map. It preserves permanent housing and affordability by allowing the tenants to buy, utilizing community-based organizations and a 99-year ground lease. It empowers tenants and communities as a whole to have their choices and have their control regarding how their housing stock is and where they live. Also, it creates a pathway to home ownership for those low and moderate income residents. And one of the issues that we want to mention is TOPA isn't anything new. It was actually the first time that TOPA was enacted was in Washington, D.C. in 1980. And it has been working for them, and it has worked in the areas in California that Matt had previously mentioned. It also gives communities the sense of empowerment because they're in control of their rental housing and they can be converted into owners with this process. Also, self-determination. You know, that is something that every community in itself needs. And a TOPA policy will give us the platform in which we need to make this happen. And how does that work? Next slide, please. The status quo, this is what we normally see. Real estate speculators, investors come into a neighborhood, they purchase the properties, they evict and displace the tenants, generally by not telling them at all that they're purchasing the property, and then they build a bunch of luxury apartment buildings and things that we actually don't benefit the community as the people that actually live there, that reside there, that have worked there, that have made the community what it is at this particular point in time. So how can we do this differently? Well, we want to remove the secrecy. See, one of the issues is when the speculators come and they purchase a property, they usually don't tell the tenants whatsoever, and then they're surprised. We want to remove that surprise. Next slide, please. So this is our version of an equitable approach. When a landlord decides that they want to sell their property, they have to tell the tenants that their property is going up for sale. This will give the tenants an opportunity to organize among themselves and get some assistance with a community-based organization in order to help them purchase the property and then become the long-term owners of that particular property. So that gives them the time not only to say that they're interested in making this purchase, it gives them an opportunity to gain the help and the financing that's required and the education necessary, and then at the end be the owners of their units and the dwellings that they've lived in and they have been rented in, and now they have an opportunity to get equity in the units in which they had already resided. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce to you not only a phenomenal community organizer and activist, but she is a member of ACE Action Los Angeles. We were instrumental in assisting Moms for Housing, and also a fellow board member of Liberty Community Land Trust. I'd like to introduce to you Silvia Venegas.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your time. Again, my name is Silvia Venegas. I am a long-term member of ACE, Alliance for Californians Community Empowerment. I am also the president of our ACE Education chapter, a board member of Liberty Community Land Trust, also a member of Reclaim Our Schools LA, Reclaim Our Homes LA, and various other grassroots organizations that are aiming towards stabilizing housing. I have lived in Van Nuys, California, where I have set my roots for over 40 years. I now have a grandson who is 10 years old. I, as everyone, wanted to reach the American dream, which I did, of purchasing my home. However, unfortunately, during the market crash, I was a victim of dual process, which is a predatory loan set up for us to fail. I was not only facing an illegal foreclosure, however, after the foreclosure, the largest corporate landlord came in and purchased my home at an auction for distressed homes. After I have had purchased my home, the corporate landlord chose to evict me. That was not going to be an option for me, as I had fought and worked so hard to have a home and to be able to reach the American dream. This corporate landlord put me through 7 years of evictions and not wanting to work with me. I had no hope of keeping my home. The struggle was very real. I had to fight with all my might. And the only way that I was able to successfully be able to maintain in my home after 7 years was through actions, direct actions and continuously calling out this corporate landlord who has been the #1 reason for gentrification, for massive evictions, since they have skyrocketed rents above 150%. Since I refused to leave, and throughout all the actions that I did, including civil disobedience, I was able to make this corporate landlord sell me back my home after 7 long years at the cash price that they purchased it. However, after 7 years of evictions, bankruptcies, and having to pay attorney fees, the only way I was able to continue and maintain my roof over my home was through the power of a community land trust. They came in, they stepped in, and they put in the money, and we were able to pay off this corporate landlord, keep me in my home, preserve me in my community, and stabilize my housing. Without a land trust, there was no possibility for me to have ever had the ability or possibility to being the homeowner that I always worked so hard for. So I truly believe that with the motto of a community land trust, it is going to stabilize our housing, the rates from other corporate landlords coming into our communities and displacing our Black and brown people that have worked so hard and live paycheck to paycheck at times. This is the only way that we are going to have hope to one day say there are no more unhoused people. Because even if it's a small unit, and if the people have the ability to have a low payment and eventually become the homeowner that we all want. So I really ask for everyone's support and continue to push for this model, as this is the true model that is really going to stabilize and give everyone equally the opportunity to be homeowners and to continue living in our communities and to be stabilized from the fear of having to lose your home because of a rent increase or because there are no strong enough tenant protections that are going to keep us in our home. So I thank you very much for this opportunity, and I encourage everyone to get involved, to join us in this fight, to help make a difference, a real difference in this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that story, Sylvia. And I just want to emphasize that for everyone, Sylvia is a person who fought for 7 years to stay in her home. And I think this story is really important when we think about how much policies like this can have an effect on the livelihoods of people in our communities. This is an extremely personal issue. And so I think we're really gracious to have that story be told in a space like this tonight. So thank you. We are going to have a lot of time for questions. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jonathan Yeager and Matt Vu, who are going to be facilitating Q&A. But I would love, Jonathan, if you just want to introduce yourself, and then folks can start thinking about questions as well.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Jonathan Yeager, and I'm a staff attorney with the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. I work in our Housing and Communities work group out of our South Los Angeles office, and I've been working for over 3 years now, primarily on affordable housing and community-controlled and community-centered economic development work. And I'll pass it back to Matt to kind of go over what the policy is.
Sure. So, I mean, you want me to cover the whole TOPA policy?
Sure. I'm happy to do it too, if we're gonna.
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, it's exciting because what TOPA is going to do is basically going to create the right of first offer and first refusal for tenants. I think there is a slide about this. Give me a second. Here we go. And so basically, the way I understand first right of offer, and correct me if I'm wrong, is tenants get first dibs when the building goes for sale. And tenants can have the chance to organize themselves or assign their rights to a qualified organization, which is like a nonprofit housing developer or
Yeah, can we skip back one slide?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, if you don't mind. So just to understand the definitions of who we're talking about here. So yeah, just we had a slide on it, so make it clear, make it a little easier to understand. Yeah, when we talk about TOPA, we talk about who is a qualified purchaser to like buy a property using the TOPA rules. And those would be the tenants themselves. But it would also be certified organizations, which are the nonprofit developers that would commit to the same kinds of affordability and tenant control that the policy is intended around. And then unlike in some of the other TOPA policies around the country, tenants actually can't assign their rights in the policy that we're fighting for. Instead, tenants can partner directly with an organization and make a joint offer together. And then when we talk about sales, TOPA applies when properties are sold. But what we're really talking about is someone who is trying to sell like an investment property on the open market for a profit, where the TOPA policy does not apply to transfers within a family. We're trying to increase the number of people who are able to build intergenerational wealth through property ownership. We're not trying to take that away from anyone who has already, benefited from that. And in addition, wills and bequests. So the policy doesn't take property away from anyone. It simply puts a pause on the sale process, kind of before a property can be listed in the traditional real estate market. What Matt was saying, the right of first offer, the qualified purchasers, so tenants or nonprofits or the tenants and nonprofits working together, kind of have this window to make an offer to buy the property, so they don't have to compete in a real estate market where people are paying all cash for multi-million-dollar properties. And also when we talk about this, it excludes owner-occupied single-family homes. So if you are someone who owns your own home and you are selling it to move into a new home, this doesn't even apply. What we're really targeting the policy at are multifamily apartment buildings and corporations that own multiple homes in order to maximize their profits.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much for that, Jonathan. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, this is so important what TOPA is doing because, excuse me, in the example that I cited previously with the Mission Economic Development Association, oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Excuse me, hold on. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was reading the report and basically it said that a lot of these type of sales happen and they don't even get listed to the public and they're completed before folks get a chance. And so like what Zarita was mentioning earlier, a lot of times tenants don't even know that the sale is happening until it's too late. And so TOPA gives us an opportunity to intervene on that and say, hey, we deserve to get in on this action too. Like we as tenants and community members live here and we should have an opportunity to buy the place that is going for sale. That's what I was going with. That's what I was thinking.
So we have one question in the chat, and again, I will definitely give, we want to give everyone some time to gather your thoughts on what specific questions you have about TOPA, but this is an open floor, so feel free to raise your hand, type in the chat, or unmute yourself and ask a question, and we'll just sort of get the conversation flowing. But Fanny asked, do we have a website?
We do have a website. I am in the process of making sure that the domain name clears, but it's going to be topaforla.org. Oh, why is that a direct message?
Oh, because it went to me. So yeah, so our website is going live likely over the weekend, but on our last slide, we'll share with you our social medias where you can get linked into the website. And once you follow us on social media, you'll have access to the website as soon as it goes up. Another question I'd like to pose while people have some time to think is, and this one is for Jonathan. Does TOPA mean that landlords have to sell their properties? Does it force a landlord to sell?
No, it absolutely does not. So TOPA is kind of an entirely voluntary policy. It does slow down the process, but like we said, that's an intentional choice in order to give more people access to the policy. And Josie, if you want, after I answer this, I think we have some more slides where we can kind of walk through what the steps of the process actually look like. But no, it doesn't force anyone to sell the property. What it does is, if and when someone chooses to sell a property that's covered by the policy, like I said, it delays the process for 10 days or so to give a window for tenants and community organizations to make those offers. And then the second half of the policy is the right of first refusal, which I'll explain. I think it's easier to explain when we get to that step of the process. Yeah. So like I said, the first step, what it does force owners to do is to give out notice that they want to sell the property. So the owner is thinking about selling the property. Once they've kind of committed to that, they provide notice, and we're asking for kind of an electronic notification process where the organizations can sign up to be notified of all the sales. In addition, the owner, if it's a rental property, would need to post notices at the property as well. So the tenants don't need to do anything ahead of time to find out be part of the TOPA process. If a qualified purchaser is interested in buying, either the tenants or the tenants jointly with a nonprofit or the nonprofit, they have 10 days to file this statement that just says, hey, the qualified purchaser is essentially raising their hand and saying, yes, I'm interested. If no one is interested in TOPA after 10 days, then the owner goes on the open market, sells or the secret market and sells the property however they want. It doesn't do anything else at that point. If someone does raise their hand, then the owner shares kind of basic information that any buyer would need, like how much profit has the building turned over the past several years? What are the current rents of all of the tenants? All of the same kind of real estate financial information that any buyer would need to do their due diligence and evaluate the property. If someone has raised their hand and filed that statement of intent, that's when the right of first offer kicks in. And depending on the size of the building, the purchaser has a window between 30 and 70 days to do that due diligence and make an offer to buy the property.
Thank you. That was super helpful. especially like clarifying so TOPA applies to voluntary sales, so it doesn't force a landlord to sell their property. It doesn't take a property from a landlord. We also have a question from Raina. What is the legal process to approve this act?
Josie, I think you are going to cover that in more detail at the end of the presentation, but it involves the local government or the state government, writing an ordinance or a bill and then passing it through the normal legislative channels. And the coalition has written a model ordinance. That's the steps that I'm describing that we have been sharing with local governments and asking them to adopt.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is, do all TOPA policies require tenants to form a tenant association to purchase the property, or is that optional?
That is optional.
Along with that, do all tenants have to agree to this, to the purchase, or can folks just sit out and still benefit from it?
I would need to go back and double check our model policy, but I believe that, why don't I do that while we move forward, just because I don't want to give a wrong answer. But broadly, it's we need to balance the fact that not every tenant is interested or capable in participating in the process. But we don't want to create a situation where one rich tenant buys the whole building and is now the landlord for all their neighbors, unless all of the neighbors want that to happen.
Okay, awesome.
Yes, so it would need to be an organization that represents a majority of the households to be a qualified purchaser in a multifamily building. But the organization can be an unincorporated association that legally takes zero effort to form and zero cost to form.
I have a question. I'm Silvia from Sage, an organizer. What are there any financial organizations already that would be able to give these loans for purchasers? Because that's what most people have trouble with, the financing of purchasers or purchases.
Josie or Matt, do you have an answer on the financing side? I have an answer, but it's not an exact answer to Sylvia's question.
I mean, I think I would like to hear your answer, but my thought is, how do tenants get in touch with community land trusts who handle the financing? But I'll open to your answer.
Sure. And so if you go to the next slide with step 4, this is a really good segue. One thing that's in the policy, and again, Sylvia, this doesn't exactly answer your question, but like we've said, the policy doesn't force landlords to even accept these TOPA offers, but the policy does provide financial incentives. We're still working out it will depend on each jurisdiction what those incentives would be, but things like waiving certain fees or costs, or even providing financing to the qualified purchasers to incentivize owners to want to be a part of TOPA. I can't stress enough how much we're not forcing anyone into TOPA, but we're trying, we're not using sticks to make people use TOPA, but we're providing carrots to encourage everyone to participate in TOPA. But I do know, Matt's mentioned public banks in the chat, and these purchases have happened in Washington, D.C. The district itself has funds to help finance some of the purchases. And I believe in the Bay Area, some like community banks and community development financial institutions have set up specialty financial products.
I will, in the chat, Sandra just put that the LA Community Land Trust Coalition is building relationships with lenders. And this is a key step in the process for any community or tenant acquisition. So we also need to continue to work with local government to identify financial support. I think that's super important. I read something for one of my class projects. I read that Supervisor Solis is starting a pilot program to help identify funding for community land trust acquisition. I know that there are many other fronts to identify money that can help acquire property for CLTs or through TOPA. I think it just requires a lot of people power and political will. So this is why we're here.
And there's
another question came.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Ultimately, the landlord can still reject a qualified purchaser's first offer, question mark.
Yes, so as you see in step 4 on the slide, the owner can reject a qualified purchaser's offer. But if that happens, if the purchaser makes a good faith, legitimate offer, and the owner is free to reject it, but that kicks in the second half of TOPA, which is the right of first refusal. And we can go to the next slide.
We have another question. What do the financial incentives in step 4 look like? We'll answer that soon. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So to finish answering Jessica's question, so if the purchaser was rejected by the seller, the purchaser holds on to this right of first refusal, and if the seller then has rejected the offer from the tenants, but then wants to sell to someone else, not through TOPA, the owner is free to do that, but the tenants or the qualified purchaser that was rejected, who's holding on to that right of first refusal, has 10 days to match that offer. They don't get to say what they have to come up with the same offer that the third party was willing to pay for it. They lose all of the incentives from step 4, but the seller, the purchaser, the rejected purchaser has this right, and so they would get to step into the shoes of that third party purchaser. The only time where the price would be adjusted would be that if there is an allegation that the seller and the third party purchaser were intentionally creating a fake price that was too high just to cut out the tenants and to avoid TOPA. If that's suspected, then there's an appraisal process that would verify what an actual fair market offer would be. But that doesn't kick in unless these allegations are made. And it's a lengthy, complex and process. And if the purchaser won't just do that every time, because the purchaser is responsible for all the costs. If it turns out that the third party buyer and the seller were engaged in a legitimate transaction. Sorry.
Oh no,
Sorry,
I
Matt,
was just saying that that's pretty interesting because, like you mentioned, these are provisions to make sure that we are going after the biggest landlords and not just little landlords who are trying to or people who are just trying to pass property. These are people who are serial transgressors and making housing unaffordable for people.
Exactly. Yeah. So the right of first refusal and that whole challenge and appraisal process is really the action that we are trying to avoid is, like Matt said, a big corporate landlord that has lots of little, sub shell companies that are, turning into buyers of the property. and they're like buying and selling amongst themselves just to avoid the tenants ever having a seat at the table. The policy is kind of narrowly written to avoid that kind of behavior without penalizing landlords who are good landlords or are just trying to sell their property because maybe it was their retirement investment was to buy a property and they want to cash out and sell to another good landlord. We're not trying to penalize anyone in this policy. We're just trying to stop the speculation and the corporate takeover and the commodification of the housing. So I can go back to Elsa's question about the financial incentives.
Cool.
So those will really vary based on which jurisdiction the policy is being passed in. It could and hopefully will look like something in Washington, D.C., where one of the incentives is there is a pool of money that the district provides that if there's a TOPA sale, then the tenants have this financing that's easy to access and guaranteed. But we've also been exploring different options, such as waiving various taxes and fees that the government might charge as part of the transaction. But what those are obviously are different at the county level versus a city.
We have another question. What do property taxes look like for tenants? And what happens to tenants who opt out? And I think Zarita answered that they can remain renters. Is that right?
Yes. So the question is a little bit different depending on when they're opting out, or like if all the tenants are opting out, then they might be renters to a nonprofit that bought the building. But if it's a building where some of the tenants form an association and the others, some elect not to, they would remain renters. And then in terms of property taxes, it would depend on who the purchaser is. But this also gets very complicated, but there is a property tax break for affordable housing. And one of the goals of the policy is that the housing would all be, any building that is purchased through TOPA would be covenanted affordable housing that would be run by the tenants themselves or some kind of cooperative or nonprofit that could qualify for the property tax exemption.
That's pretty powerful. All right. Are there any further questions? These are really good. Well, Jonathan, I think you were mentioning how like certain nonprofits qualify for tax exempt status, but is that also written into TOPA? How they must, you said that they must be covenanted. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, so once the building is purchased by a qualified purchaser, so either the tenants, the organization, or a joint, them working together, they would then have to record what we call in the business an affordability covenant, which is just something that's recorded against the title of the property that requires it to be used in an affordable, community controlled way. So it essentially would say that, when it's being used as rentals, other than the people who currently live there and their families, another kind of umbrella goal of our TOPA policy, like Zarita put in the chat, is no displacement. No one who lives at the property can get evicted because TOPA is happening. But when those tenants leave, if the building is being operated as rentals, when those tenants leave and new tenants come in to rent, they would be affordable housing at various income levels, the same way that, you know, the city and the county and the state produce other affordable housing that uses those state-defined, you know, extremely low, very low, low income levels. And there would be
30,
rules
60.
around the resale of the property too, to avoid someone using TOPA to possibly get a good price or get those incentives from the government and then turn around and flip the property. There would be rules, there are rules built in that would limit the appreciation, just to ensure that the next person who comes along and buys it can also afford to buy it. And the next person can also live in the, you know, be someone from the same neighborhood.
All right. We have another question from Elizabeth, who's asking, where would TOPA apply? Why does the TOPA for LA website say it would only apply in unincorporated Los Angeles? Or is that in reference to an existing proposal for unincorporated areas? What about the city of LA? So I think right now we're aiming for the LA County Board of Supervisors, which means that TOPA would apply only to the unincorporated areas. But the city council in 2019 has directed the housing department to write its own ordinance that would allow community organizations that are mission driven for housing to purchase under TOPA in a similar policy, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct. Yeah, so the reason why our website mentions the unincorporated Los Angeles is because there is currently a motion made by Supervisor Solis to study and possibly implement this policy. But I think the coalition has its sights on much more than just unincorporated Los Angeles.
Yeah, so I think that's something we wanted to emphasize as we gather Liberty, CLTs, and Trust South LA's network tonight, because I know Trust South LA, a lot of our members and folks in our network live in the city of LA. We're based in South Central Los Angeles. So it is true that TOPA for LA, the campaign that we're talking about tonight, wouldn't apply to large amounts of South LA. If anything, I think we're looking at some areas of unincorporated Southeast LA that would be affected, but I think the idea is that passing TOPA at the county level like this sets a precedent so that TOPA can later become a rule of law at the city level as well. So, but yes, thank you for that question, because that's super important to acknowledge that this campaign may not affect you if you live in the city of Los Angeles, or if you live in if you don't live in unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County. But again, it's the momentum that we're looking for. So yeah, I think we have more questions, Matt, if you want to take them.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandra also wrote an answer to the piece about property taxes, saying that the California Community Land Trust Network is sponsoring a piece of legislation, which is AB 1206, written by Bennett, that would eliminate property taxes for limited equity housing co-ops that would house lower income resident owners. I think that speaks also to what CLTs have the potential to do once we buy housing under TOPA. We would have limited equity housing that would allow people to access the benefits of home ownership without a lot of the big risks, while also removing this, you know, this. Yeah, I think that's right. Let me see. Annette asks a question: is the policy you are writing targeting housing with expiring affordability covenants at all?
So this policy doesn't specifically target expiring affordability covenants, which are a huge issue right now. You know, we're losing tens of thousands of affordable housing units every year because the covenants are expiring. But our policy recommendation is that the covenants that the new covenants that get recorded under TOPA would be forever. So they would not expire after 30 or 55 years. So we are thinking ahead 55 years in the future to avoid the problem. There's not exactly a way to target those kinds of properties specifically in TOPA. This policy would apply if the owner is selling the property if a property where the covenants are expiring, if that owner is selling, this policy would apply. And there is also a separate state law that governs a right of offer for expiring covenants.
You know, I feel like one of the reasons why I got really excited about Trust was because of the Roland Curtis Gardens project that they did. And I believe that that project had an expiring affordability covenant. Is that right? And y'all bought them out? Well,
I'm
think
gonna
that
let
would be
someone
cool
from
because,
Trust answer that question.
yeah, I was trying to like pause and see if I could get some input, but honestly, I was in class I was fangirling over this because I feel like this was the process by which Trust really went forward without TOPA and made it happen. So if we have TOPA, this would allow more organizations to step in when affordability covenants are expiring to be able to save affordable people, I mean people in affordable housing, from losing their homes. I think that's where I was trying to go with this, because right now there's no safety net for that to happen, and this would provide a legal framework to allow tenants to become tenant owners.
And in addition to that, Matthew, I was actually very in awe about the Roland Curtis Gardens project too, because one, it was owned by Jeff Green, which is the same owner that we're struggling with Dorset Village, and then want to demolish all of those 206 RSO units. But the people that lived at the Roland Curtis Gardens property, the 48, they all got the exclusive right to return. And so that to me is the key to anti-displacement, which is the whole purpose of the goal, is not to displace the people that have lived in the community, you know, for several years, have paid rent to this particular owner, and then the moment that, you know, they decide they want to increase their fortune, the people that are renting or occupying the land is no longer wanted or desirable. So I think that anti-displacement is the key.
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful project also.
All right, Sandra explained that the covenant at Roland Curtis Gardens had expired before Trust bought it, and the owner started to try to kick the tenants out of the building as soon as the covenants expired. Thank you so much for that extra information, yes. Let's see, we have a couple more questions. Are there restrictions for Airbnb rentals? What would maintenance look like, and utilities for tenants?
Yeah, sure. I don't believe that our current policy proposal addresses Airbnb rentals. The owners would be subject to whatever rules apply in that jurisdiction. Like, I am not sure what the status of home sharing is in the county, but you know, the city of Los Angeles has a home sharing ordinance that requires registration and limits the number of days that the home can be shared. And I believe our policy as it stands would just defer to whatever the existing Airbnb regulations are. But it's certainly an issue that we as a coalition probably should study more and figure out if it's something we want to specifically address through TOPA. And then about the maintenance and the utility bills, once the like 7 steps of TOPA are done, the purchaser is now the homeowner. And so they are responsible for anything that a traditional homeowner would be responsible for.
Regarding the Airbnb thing too, I would assume that if it would depend on who purchases the building too. So if it's like an organization that purchases a CLT that purchases the building and the governance structure says we don't want Airbnb, then that might also be a possibility. Is that correct?
That's true. Yes. I guess what I was saying was that the TOPA law itself wouldn't say anything about Airbnb, though we can certainly look into whether it should. But as of right now, the proposed TOPA law would defer to the buyer if the buyer wants to restrict, if it's a nonprofit, they might want to restrict Airbnbs.
Yeah. And I would imagine it depends whether it's single family homes or like multifamily units or whatnot too, but that's like a lot of parsing.
Exactly. Yeah. And cities and the county right now are looking at rules that would, some places have passed them, some places they're not law yet, but they're looking at different rules about exactly those kinds of things.
Cool.
And then I see Erica's asked now about what do the maintenance and utility bills look like for the tenants who opt out? And so if they're those tenants who opted out who are now remaining as renters, again, those kinds of costs are costs that the owner is responsible for. And so it would this will vary on a case-by-case basis, but I imagine most of the time it would look like a normal, like a traditional apartment renter landlord situation, where it depends on what the lease, some leases say that the tenants are responsible for utilities and maintenance, and some say that the landlord is. And TOPA wouldn't prescribe what that needs to look like.
All right. We have another question. What about single family homes with ADUs? Would they qualify, or does it depend on what type of owner it has?
That is a very good question. I think it would depend on what type of owner and whether the ADU was permitted, whether it's considered a single family or a multi-family residence under the zoning code.
That's a good question. I know that the TOPA as written excludes single family homes where the owner lives in it. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Do we have a raised hand from the audience right over here?
Yeah, I wanted to ask another question. So if the tenants become owners, is the ownership like for 99 years, and once that has passed, do their kids inherit, or do they need to sell the property again, or how would that work?
No, so again, this might vary based on the specific ownership structure, but once the tenants are owners, they're just owners. Like they own the property full stop. And so they can choose to leave it to their kids, or they can choose to sell it. And they'd have all the same kind of rights and responsibilities that any other homeowner would have.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more
We have
questions?
another question just popped in. Would Section 8 recipients be able to participate in this process?
Yes, so there's no reason why they couldn't, though they may lose their voucher if they are now homeowners. But some housing authorities have programs that allow Section 8 participants that have an individual housing choice voucher to convert that voucher into a down payment assistance. I don't know if the county development authority, the housing authority for the county, I don't know if they specifically have that program, but it actually may be, Section 8 participants may actually be in a very good position under TOPA to be able to convert their vouchers into down payments.
Particularly if they're in a limited equity co-op.
Absolutely. All right. I feel like all these questions have been on point. Like I'm learning stuff about TOPA that I had not known before, and I've been really reading up on everything all over the country. So this is really exciting. Are there any further questions before we move on? No? All right, so shall we take this time to introduce Paul, who is part of the Liberty Community Land Trust, to take us into what is coming up next.
Yes, this has been very informative, but as you can see, this is a moving train. This process is constantly changing, so it's important for you to stay in touch with us. On the screen now are some of the social media contact points that were talked about earlier. And there will be another upcoming town hall meeting if you didn't get all of this one in place as well. At these additional meetings and on our websites, there should be, or on these social media sites, there should be some information, additional information on how to contact our local representatives to move this forward. In the meantime, there are community land trusts are partnering with community development corporations to purchase buildings that would function very much like these future TOPA projects. And if you're interested in that, or if your building is coming up for sale, or you know of an impending sale, let us know. We may be able to get some resources where we can make a move on the property as well.
Awesome. So just to share, here are some of our socials. Get in touch with us, follow us, share us, comment at us, tag us in things. We'd love to know what is going on and the kind of discussions that are happening around TOPA. This is our link tree. We're going to be updating this sporadically, and then also just real quick, I wanted to share with everyone topa4la.org. Here she comes. So get in touch with us, find out what's coming up. We're going to be posting upcoming events. This website will be evolving, and please sign up and get involved here at the bottom. I see two hands up. Let's Rocio and Kim. Rocio, do you want to go first? You have a question?
Sí, me gustaría que la próxima reunión tuviera slides en español, todos los slides en español.
She's saying that she would like for the slides to be in Spanish for the next time.
Bueno, en español y inglés, porque la mayoría estuvieron en inglés.
She's saying Spanish and English because most of them were just in English.
Yeah, so, thank you, Rocio, for that question. So we have the slides from today were in English and Spanish, especially the first section. The Q&A section slides were alternating English and Spanish, but feel free to you can private message me with your email, and I can send you a copy of the presentation that has all of the information is both in English and Spanish. But when you have the full presentation to look through, you'll see that the slides in the middle section, they alternate, but all of the information is there. And we'll pass to Kim. Kim, did you have a question?
Can you hear? Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Paul mentioned that the CLTs partner up with CDCs to purchase or to get financing and purchase properties. What does CDC stand for?
Community Development Corporation.
Okay,
Thank you,
I
Kim.
missed to understand what CDC stood for. Okay,
Thank
thank
you, Kim.
you.
Awesome. And I just wanted to point out that Roberto, our colleague from FCTL, shared the flyer for the next TOPA town hall in the chat. So please share that with your networks. And definitely we want to drive attendance. We have a series of town halls. This is just the first in a series. So that one's coming up March 6th.
All right.
And I will also mention, and this is back in reference to Rocio's question from earlier, if anyone would like access to the information that we shared tonight, the presentation, please email me. I'm gonna write my email in the chat right now. It's josie@trustsouthla.org. And I can send you a PDF version of the slides. And again, it's a lot of information to fit in both English and Spanish, especially at the rate that we were presenting. So I really encourage folks to read through it on their own time as well. So again, just email me, josie@trustsouthla.org, if you would like access to the slides for you to have for keeps. Any other questions or comments or questions about how to get on our social media, when the next town hall is, March 6th, and what time, Roberto, what time is the next town hall?
It's from 5 to 7.
Awesome, 5 to 7, March 6th.
Yeah, please spread the word. We're actually trying to target different regions. And so if you know folks in the District 5 or District 1 areas, we'd really appreciate it. We're really trying to do as much outreach as possible to those regions. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so
Kim,
much.
did you have another question?
Yeah, I do have another question regarding the flyers. You know, noting the dates of the town halls. They don't really have either Zoom information on them or a registration Zoom on them. And I had to search through our land trust to find the Zoom information to get on today.
We will, if you want to bookmark our website, topaforla.org, we will have all the pertinent information on how to log on and when the next event will be. Let me show right now. So this one has the event for tonight, and this is the link to join. If you can see, oh no, I'm not sharing my screen, I'm sorry. But I will put the link in the chat.
Yeah, we created a registration for the next one. So it's on the flyer as well.
Yeah, I think the next two town halls have a registration attached.
I say what? Okay, that's what any registration number. Yeah, it didn't have any registration number on it. So it was difficult to spread the word as far as the flyer is concerned, but it didn't have any Zoom information on it. That's what I was referring to. Okay, did you hear that?
Yep.
Yes.
You're
Thank
talking
you.
about Zoom
Okay,
information,
thank
is that correct? Yes, we will
Yeah.
update all of the websites to make sure that the Zoom information is available.
All right. Any other questions? I think we can close.
Yeah, on the flyer.
Sorry, say that again,
You
Tim.
know, with the
Kim, you broke up a little bit. So can you say that again? Was it just about the Zoom link? Kim, where'd you go? Yeah, so the Zoom links,
another question.
the Zoom links will be posted on the websites and social medias. And thank you for your patience with the RSVPing process, because each town hall is hosted by a different set of folks. But if you're unsure, just check our social medias and our website. Oh my gosh, Matt, it's your birthday?
It will be at midnight.
Woo! Happy birthday, Matt.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
This is your birthday party.
There's nothing I'd rather be doing, honestly. I'm so excited to be here amongst everyone and for us to have this conversation. This is extremely powerful, turning you know, community power and desires into policy, into creating like an infrastructure that will help us be able to stay in our communities forever. So I'm so happy to be here.
Excellent. So I'll let folks log off and continue with your evenings. We're going to close here. Happy birthday wishes to Matt. Reach out to us with any questions. Our emails are on the flyers, and you can also contact through the website. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, and everyone be safe.
Thank you, community.
Thank you, everyone. Have
Thanks
a good
so
evening.
much, everybody. Great job,
Stay
team.
connected.
Are we still live?
I'm about to end the live stream. All right, live stream.
We did it, Joe. We did it.
We did it.
That's awesome. Yay, the first town hall.
All right, it feels good.